Joe Jones, former LAPD officer, former Celebrity Bodyguard, former Major League Baseball draft choice, entrepreneur and CEO of Versatile Productions, father of former Rock Nation artist KC Veggies, and author of the book The Tragic Life of a Black L.A. Cop. Let's talk about it. What made you write this book?
Yeah, well, the book was birthed from my experience is in the tragic things that I went through as a police officer on LAPD. I had just a succession of really, really violent things that took place, and those things that I dealt with caused me to have PTSD, and within that process of having PTSD, it caused me to be emotional about a lot of things, to have stress and feel a certain type of way. So the only way I felt like I was going to be able to cure that was to tell my story and to extract all the pain that I was feeling. As well, I wanted to also try and make my waves as it pertains to police reform and some of the things that can happen as a black police officer. And as well, I also wanted to try to do what I could do to save some young black men from being putting themselves in bad situations, and as well being put in bad situations.
So I read the book. There's a whole lot of crazy experiences in the book.
Yeah.
Let's talk about something that might not be in the book. What's one of the craziest things that you've seen?
Yeah. Well, I had a situation while just not being on the job very long, where I was at a friend's house at a gathering, a little social gathering at a friend's house towards the Hollywood area, and we were standing on the porch, and I heard a guy yelling, and I heard somebody yelling and screaming at a person, and then as I stepped out on the porch from my friend's house, I noticed a guy walking up the street. And when he walked up the street, he crossed the street and walked over to a car. This was about 100 feet in front of me. He walked across the street and walked over to a car that was parked. And next thing you know, he pulled out a gun, pointed it at the car, and shot about 3 times, head first, shot the person in the head like 3 times, right on the street while I was looking. And the guy was walking directly by me. So when he walked by me, he was in a dazed kind of space. He wasn't being confrontational or anything. So I basically stepped out in front of him from behind the car, and I grabbed his hands and I took the gun away from him, and I was like, man, what what you just do? He was, and he I don't know what I just did. He said, I don't know what I just did. So the police was called, and the police came. I held him until they got there, and once they got there, he was arrested. And I just basically handed him off to them, because during that time I just had so much resentment towards the police department behind the things that I was experiencing, and I didn't even want to be a part of it. I did want to stop this person from getting away with murder, of course, but I didn't want to have anything to do with it. I just handed them off. I didn't tell them I was an officer or anything, and I just gave them to the guy, and said, hey, there's the person he shot over there. And I ultimately went back into the party, and they thought I was a hero. But, at the end of the day, I just felt like I just did what I could do to stop this guy from killing this person and then just leaving.
So what you just watched somebody get murdered in the street, and then you go back and go back into the party.
Yeah.
What do you think that comes from? How do you think most people will be? There won't be any partying for a while.
Yeah. Well, you know, when you've experienced so many things, I mean, you grow up in the hood. You know, you just see so much. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And you know, here this was. I mean, I've seen people that I know who have been killed. So when I see a person that I've never seen before, know nothing about, get killed, that's really nothing to me. You know, I mean, it's not that it's nothing, but it's not like it's something that was going to completely, totally disrupt my day. Of course, it was an issue at that time. Mm-hmm. Of course, I had a lot of sentiment towards the person that it happened to and wondered why this person would do what he did. But, you know, it's just part of growing up in the city. You know, you see things that are tragic and crazy, but you keep going.
Right. I think the term for that now is normalizing. Things are getting normalized.
Yeah.
Certain things that shouldn't.
Yeah.
Are normalized. So in the book you talk about your house getting shot up and needing police protection.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Very, very early on, as I was actually a police officer on probation still, and I had a situation where I was at my home. Me and my wife, we were not married very long. I believe at that time she was actually pregnant. Mm-hmm. And we were just newly married, hadn't been married no more than a year or so, and we were in our new home. And I had just walked away out of the kitchen back towards the bedroom, and it was in the evening, probably about 8:30 or so, when all of a sudden I started hearing shots. I started hearing glass burst. I started hearing ricochets and all kind of stuff, just crazy shots flying. It felt like it was a war happening right inside my house. And it was the scariest thing in the world. I grabbed my wife. She was crying. I pulled her to the ground, and I actually reached and grabbed my gun, but she was so hysterical. I was trying to keep her together. We were in the room, and this was happening inside the house, right towards the kitchen area, towards the front of the house. So I didn't know if somebody was trying to come in the house or whatever the case was. So I armed myself and kept my wife down and was protecting her. But I was also paying attention and making sure someone was not trying to come in the door or go towards the back window or whatever the case. So, you know, it was just shots, you know, for at least for 45 seconds to a minute. Just nothing but shots and glass breaking and ricochets and all kind of craziness. So, you know, at that point, of course, I'm scared, scared for myself, scared for my wife, and I'm just up armed. I was thankful I had my weapon right there by me. So I was up and ready to, do whatever I needed to do to protect us. But somehow after about 3 minutes, after a minute, the shooting stopped. But then after about 3 minutes, all of a sudden, or 3 or 4 minutes or so, we're still bunkered down in the room and trying to stay down because I didn't know if it was somebody still trying to come in the house or whatever. All of a sudden, I start hearing helicopters. I started hearing helicopters, and then next thing you know, I started hearing voices. Hey, you guys all right in there? Or is anybody in here? Anybody in here? I was like, hey, yeah, we're in here in the bedroom, So the bottom line was the police had shown up at the scene, and, I ended up coming out and, of course, left my weapon and came out, and my home had been shot completely up. The area that I had just walked out of in the kitchen, they shot it up with 6 shotgun rounds, 9mm, and 38 rounds. And at that time, those are all the only guns that were authorized by LAPD. So during that time, there was a fear of like, well, why would that be? And I knew I had an incident with a sergeant at some point related to working without a work permit. You know, I had the sergeant who was handling my situation, and he got upset with me or whatever the case behind the investigation. So I wondered, was this the reason? Was this the rationale? You know, and I just didn't know, and I was scared to death, and my family was scared. And the crazy thing about it was, you know, the next day, I mean, they ended up, I mean, you know, from that point forward, they had Metro, which is like which is the baddest cops on LAPD, bodyguarding my house and sitting on my house in terms of just making sure everything was okay in case the people who shot my house up came back. But then 2 doors down from my house, there was, at my neighbor's house, 3 people got killed in that house while the police were at my house 2 doors away. Somebody came over and shot those people up, and the police were at my house, and those people ended up, you know, getting away. They killed those people in that house, and they got away with it. And ultimately, I think they ended up catching them later on. But that brought the thought process that, oh, well, maybe they shot my house up accidentally, thinking that we were that house previous to. So the people who actually have committed this crime have never been taken into custody. We never found out who shot my home up. And, you know, that was a very, very scary situation.
So one of the most interesting parts of the book, another crazy experience, I think, was dealing with a situation where you had a friend who was on the force with you actually shoot and kill someone you grew up with. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, that was a really bad thing, and I'll give parts of it because I don't want to go into the emotions of everything that happened on that night, because it just brings back too many terrible memories. But at the same time, I was a police officer in the area that I grew up in. So that day I was coming out of the station, and I hear a call that came out right around the corner from where I grew up, right around the corner in the same neighborhood, right there. So I was just leaving the station. So this call was literally 3 to 3 minutes away from where I was at, 3 to 5 minutes. So I went code, 3, in other words, lights and siren. I flew over there, me and my partner. When we get to the scene, I see a person laying in the street. And there was a person laying in the street, and there was no other cars around. And then when I get there, as I pull up, I see a family that I knew very, very well. And I also see my friend that I grew up with, who ultimately became a gangbanger, a dope dealer, and all of these different things. But nonetheless, he was somebody that I knew very well. And he was somebody that, when I was a kid, I actually spent the night at this guy's house. You know what I mean? And I knew his family. And when I pulled up on the scene, they were like crying, begging me to help them. And they were saying, Junior, they knew me by my name because I was a junior, Joe Jr. They called me Junior. Nobody called me Junior unless they knew me very, very well. And they were like, Junior, they killed my baby. They killed, And here I'm looking, my boy, gurgling in blood, trying to live, trying to fight for his life, and had several bullet wounds all over his body. And I'm like, man, I'm trying to figure out how in the hell did I get caught up in this? And I'm thinking to myself, the thing for me to do is to get this family away from seeing this, from looking at this, So I get out and I try to back them away and get them in the house and what have you. And, soon after that, some other officers were there, like plainclothes officers were right in the area. So without going into a whole bunch more detail, later on come to find out that the persons that killed Jesse was an undercover narcotics buy. And the guy that I grew up with supposedly pulled a gun on them when they went to sell him some drugs. And in turn, they got the drop on him and shot him up. And once they shot him up, they took the officers away from the scene. And that's when I pulled up and saw my friend. But it was so much more happened from that. But it's just, that's what I'll say for now. Right. You got to get the book to see it.
Right.
Because it just brings back too many terrible memories.
And I would assume that kind of, at least, I would assume that kind of fueled the tension that you had, the pull that you had between, your cop side and your friend's side in regards to how people see you. How, which side are you on?
Yeah.
Exactly. Whose side are you on?
Well, honestly speaking, there was, an issue with that came about with the detective that was handling the case, who basically went around telling other people in my division that there was a situation where there was a shooting, and I sided with the gangbangers instead of being on the side of the police officers. When in fact, I wasn't on anybody's side. I wasn't taking a position with anybody. I was simply trying to stop this family from seeing this. And the detective in question was basically trying to drag the mother, the wife, up some stairs. And I just asked him to stop. I said, let me get her. They'll listen to me, and let me get her up. And then he tried to do it again, and then I had to be a little bit more aggressive in telling him. But I wasn't taking anybody's side. I was simply trying to diffuse what was a terrible situation with people that were in the neighborhood that I grew up in, standing right there looking at this situation. There was a big crowd of people, and it became a big thing, you know what I mean? And, it was actually one of the most uncomfortable situations I had ever been in to realize, and I didn't find this out till after, that my friend was somebody that I knew was the one that killed him. I didn't know, so how could I choose sides? Because at that point, I didn't even know it was a cop that had anything to do with it. I was just really diffusing the situation because I knew that I had an upper hand because of who I was to get these people to stop doing, get out of the crime scene and back away from that situation.
All right, speaking of cop friends, in the book you talk about one of your closer force buddies that unfortunately was killed, at least on paper, by road rage. Let's talk about that. What's your thoughts?
Wow. Yeah. Well, I mean, once again, I'll touch on it some. I think it's kind of public information as well. It's in my book. So I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail, but I will tell you this, that first off, the guy who was killed was a father, was a cool guy, was a good dude. And, he was definitely somebody I considered to be a friend. And we actually used to go to lunch every few days. And his ex-wife was a rap mogul's ex-wife. His girlfriend was a rap mogul's ex-wife. Not gonna say names.
Gotta get the book for the names.
Yeah, you got it. Well, you may not even get the names there, but I said a rap mogul's ex-wife, and you can put two and two together and probably figure it out. But at the end of the day, me and him had spoke on the phone probably 2 days before he got killed, and he told me, man, they following me, man, and don't even think I know it. And when he said he was following him, they were following him, it was in reference to the fact that he had sued him and his girlfriend, had sued the department, LAPD, because they basically, without a search warrant, violated his residence, went in his home without a search warrant and what have you, and supposedly, confiscated some things or what have you without a search warrant. So he filed a lawsuit against him. Now, later on, come to find out that he tells me that he was being followed. And 2 days later, I hear it on the news that a LAPD officer was killed in a road rage situation. Come to find out, it's my boy. He got killed by a detective that was on the job, who was following him. And it was put out like it was just a road rage situation, when in fact he was killed by a detective. And this same person ultimately bragged about in some situation on at a training situation, and somebody taped it, and he bragged about killing this police officer who was my friend. And me knowing his wife, me knowing his kids, it just hit home. And it was just the scariest thing ever. And me having had experienced the shooting at my own home, it was just like, I don't know what the hell I've got myself into when it came down to the things that were happening all around me consistently, and it was just a very, very troubling situation to know that a guy that I knew so well is dead, and he was just alive 2 days ago.
All right, so I think, in my opinion, probably the craziest story that I don't think that even other cops have experienced, and that's and that's being arrested by a cop while being a cop.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah. That was actually, if I could say so, it was really, when it was all said and done, it was the straw that broke the camel's back. When it came down to me being in law enforcement anymore. I was working as a police officer, but I also had a business. I used to do events and stuff like that. So in my travels of doing events, I had a family friend who was actually a police officer as well. And I was basically going to his job as a doorman at a nightclub to give him some invitations to hand out for me for an event that I had coming up. And I did this as well as did the policing, because it was really a funneling thing for me to take my mind off of the stress that I had of being an officer. And the bottom line is, I showed up in the Hollywood area in front of a night, trying to go to this nightclub, and I see there was a hot dog vendor right there. So I'm getting ready to get me a hot dog, the kind they had the little bacon wrapped around it, and grab me a hot dog and go into my car. And as I get ready to order, a sheriff car pulls in behind my car. And the person gets out of the car and approaches my car real abruptly. So I step off the curb to go and get in my car and get out of the way because I know I'm illegally parked. I know I'm wrong, you know. So I step off the curb, and this officer is walking on the driver's side of my car towards me, and he tells me, "Get back on the fucking curb." Dang. And I'm like, oh man, you know. So I'm knowing I got a person who is, you know, pretty excitable. So I'm knowing that, you know, I gotta try to defuse this thing, you know. So he said, "Get back on the fucking curb." So I get back on the curb, and I'm trying to tell him, hey, you know, I try to get to my ID and tell him that, look, man, you know, hey, I'm not trying to be a problem, you know, to you or whatever the case. He said, and I had my fanny pack. I had a fanny pack on me. He said, "That means if you're an officer, that means you got a fucking gun in that bag. Get your fucking hands up." He took his gun out, pointed it in my face, pointed at my head, and told me he'll blow my fucking head off. He said, he told me that he would fucking blow my head off. And I dropped my bag immediately. I said, "Hey, man, you know, what are you doing, man?" I said, I'm a police. I do the same thing you do, man. I'm not trying to be a problem, you know. And I actually had my ID wrapped around my finger. I had a little chain on my ID, and I tried to show it to him. And he was like, "Man, I said, you a cop, that means you got a gun in that bag, da 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 da." So the bottom line was, he proned me out. He put the gun, told me don't move, did all this stuff, man. And I put my hands on the car, spread out. I was just doing everything I could do to have him feel comfortable, you know. So he ultimately gets my bag, gets my gun bag off the ground, picks up my ID, opens it up, takes my gun out, right? Mm-hmm. And he puts it on, I'm standing on this side of the car. So he puts my gun and my ID and my badge and my ID and my gun and badge, all that stuff, on the car, on the hood. So at that time, an LAPD car was driving by, and he gestured to them to stop and pull over and come over and help him. So they pulled over. So 2 LAPD officers got out, 2 white officers that I'd never seen before in my life. They got out, and he asked them to come over, and he asked him, he said, he showed him my ID. He said, "Is this, an LAPD ID?" They tell him yes. They said, "Are you guys authorized to carry this type of weapon?" They say yes. He said, "Yes, that's an off-duty, that's a weapon we can use off-duty," or whatever the case. So he basically told them, like, yeah, whatever, He kind of shunned them, as to say, like, he didn't even believe them, I ultimately, went through hell behind the situation. I ended up fighting it in court. I ended up having the LAPD officers who were on my side in the beginning come to court and change their testimony. This is all after a 2-year battle and fight with this situation. They came. At first, they were on my side. There were 8 independent witnesses and 4 sheriffs who had their story. I have 4 LAPD officers who sided with what I said. There was 4 independent witnesses who were at the scene who saw what happened. I don't know, didn't know these people, and they said that what I said happened. Now 4 sheriffs conjuring up all kind of lies, saying that I was acting a complete fool, or whatever the case. They try to make me seem like I was being disrespectful and disruptive. I had a sergeant from my station come and do an investigation right there on the scene. When that happened, the sergeant, they exonerated me at that point in time from anything, saying that I really didn't do anything. It looks like I didn't do anything. You got 8 independent witnesses who are not my friends saying that I didn't do anything wrong. And then you got 4 sheriffs who absolutely have to have a story that is in concert with each other. You know, so it just ended up being the worst feeling that you could ever feel, to have policemen lying on me in court.
All right. O.J. Simpson. You know, you were a cop at that time.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about it. Let's talk about your experience.
Yeah, I was a cop working that same exact division. Yeah, it's crazy. So, you know, that night when I heard about it, I automatically questioned. I said, wow, I wonder where OJ was. Because I think any person who has been in a relationship with and had an ex that has your children, and maybe there could be still some feelings and some child support scenarios, and you know, I know that could be a very volatile situation, because I actually experienced having a child and having the issues of a relationship with a you know, baby mother scenario situation. So my first thing was like, damn, where was OJ, right? So the next morning, I was on the crime scene. I get to work, and the bodies had been there the whole night, and I get there right when they take the bodies away. And I'm on the scene. I'm standing there. Blood is running towards me, you know. I'm there. I see where everything happened. I see where all the bodies were. I'm at the place of where it took place. And I just happened to, you know, just try to fathom who else did it. Who else could it have been? You know, and it never came about that there was more than one set of footprints and this, that, and the other. So I basically surmised that, damn, maybe he did it. You know, maybe he did it. I didn't know, you know. And then now when all the evidence was brought to the table and Johnny Cochran finding out that blood was planted on the scene and all this kind of stuff, you know, that made me question what the hell really happened here. You know what I mean? What really happened here, you know? And when it was all said and done, we all know the results.
What are your thoughts today? You still think he did it?
Has any other suspects come up?
Well, you know, I spoke to some people who were probably my age now back then, and they said it was a strong belief going on that his son did it.
Yeah,
and that he didn't want to turn. He knew his son did it, but he didn't want to turn his son in. And so he just let the evidence play out.
Yeah. Well, I heard that thing too. I heard that rumor too. But then there was also a thing called CTE, where athletes, former football players, from the trauma of being hit in the head time and time again, become extremely violent and become, you know, angry, violent, and do things that you just they wouldn't ordinarily do. And I don't know who did it at this point. I don't know. But I just think that there's nobody who had the motive to kill her like he would. Paying her a lot of money a month. He still was in love with her. And here it is, a young lover is over there with her. You know what I mean? So I'm not going to say what. I'm not going to say what. I mean, you know, the law did what it did, and, you know, God knows.
Another crazy thing back then. I mean, this time period was wild for LAPD.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we can't talk about O.J. Simpson without talking about Rodney King and the L.A. riots.
Yeah.
And how crazy that was.
Wow.
At that time period.
Wow.
Let's talk about it.
The craziest, man. Like I said, I grew up 3 minutes from the flashpoint of the riots. And the same night of the riots, I was hosting a buyers group. I had started an entrepreneurial buyers group of men who I was putting together to buy property and to make investments in the city. So I had, several very, very prominent young men at my house at the time, and we were having a meeting. And it seemed like the same exact night, the same time, the situation was starting to fester over on Florence and Normandy, whereby the news was showing the footage of what was taking place. And remember, I had my home shot up. Mm-hmm. So at that time, they were not giving officers rovers radios to take home.
Oh.
But I actually had a radio because they wanted me to be able to get directly in contact with the police in case something happened. So the situation was occurring whereby I'm seeing them beating people up. I'm seeing them pull but then when I saw them pull Reginald Denny, I mean, I'm looking at the news and I see them pulling Reginald Denny out the car and throwing bricks at his head. So I get on the radio, hey, they're killing people in the intersection at Florence and Normandy on my radio. Need units to respond as soon as possible to Florence and Normandy. This is Rover such and such, such and such. Have units respond to Florence and Normandy. And not only did they not respond, all the officers in the units retreated back to the station. And as opposed to killing that situation and stopping it before it got started, they allowed it to just fester and happen and take place. And next thing you know, it was, fire, killings, all kind of craziness all over the city.
So do you think they didn't respond because they were scared or they wanted it to get out of hand?
I can't go into the minds of what another man's thinking.
Right.
But all I can say is that, the lack of stepping up allowed people to see the news and see all of this happening and to see that the police weren't going to do anything about it. And then I think it just snowballed into a really, really big thing because they didn't do anything to stop it. They just let it happen. So now it happened all over the city. But I think also they had to be conscious of the safety of officers, not having enough officers, not being prepared to deal with that type of animosity and hate. All of a sudden, they had to put a plan together to deal with it, and they weren't ready for it. So they backed everybody away, which was a bad thing. But then at the same time, in terms of trying to, keep officers safe, where was the responsibility? You know what I mean? But I think that, if it's not your own, you may not worry about it. You may not worry about it as much. But it was a terrible situation. It was a very uncomfortable place to be, to see that happening and see nobody do anything about it.
Christopher Dorner. I don't know how many people out there would remember the crazy cop, you know, or so the news said, the crazy cop running around shooting folks.
Yeah.
Crazy LAPD officer. He was LAPD, right?
Yes, he was.
Yeah. So I can remember. I remember when it happened.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, I also remember not feeling too mad about it.
Yeah.
For some reason.
Yeah.
You know, and it had nothing for me. It had nothing to do with, you know, I obviously felt bad for the victims.
Yeah.
But to me, I felt like I was looking at someone who finally snapped.
Yeah.
You know, there's so many crazy things happening to all of us.
Yeah.
Inside and outside of the police force.
Yeah.
And then when you finally see someone just say, you know what, enough is enough. I'm just gonna go crazy.
Yeah.
And you can understand that.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to like be like so mad.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it. What's your thoughts?
Well, I mean that situation it hit home. Very emotional for me. During that time, I couldn't sleep. I had so many emotions flowing through me. And the scary part about it is when you put my picture next to Christopher Dorner's picture when we were cops in our uniforms, we looked just alike. I would. That's one person I would say that when you compare the photos of us being police officers, we look just alike. And people were getting killed that looked nothing like him, that officers thought might have been him. And they were shooting at people in trucks that looked like his truck, and it was just a whole crazy pandemonium. It was just a crazy situation in regards to people having fear and officers being at a heightened level of fear because this guy had basically put this manifesto out that he was going to kill cops. He had already killed a lieutenant's daughter and her son-in-law. And when he killed those innocent people, I couldn't take it. I mean, I was like, man, this is crazy. I said, here this guy is going around killing people. He looks like me. I feel like I probably went through worse scenarios than he did. And I didn't kill people, you know. Although I was hurt, although I was an angry man at the time I went through the stuff I did, but I didn't kill people, you know. I was angry, I was hurt, but I didn't kill people. And I just wanted to relate that information and get it out there. So I wrote my own manifesto explaining that, hey, these are the things I went through. And I didn't kill people. I said, bro, stop doing what you're doing. You know, stop what you're doing and realize that, you know, God is the overseer of these types of situations. And, you know, they know you mean business. But somehow, when it was all said and done, the media took it as I took his side. Somehow they wanted to say that I took a person who was going around killing people's side when I'm actually wrote a whole manifesto to stop him from killing people. So, you know, my belief in the system at that point was just already terrible because I wasn't on the job anymore. But when you try to twist my words and make me seem like I'm trying to do something negative when I'm trying to do something positive, you know, that's just ridiculous, you know. And it just made me lose faith in the media, made me lose faith in the whole system, which I had already lost faith in, you know. So that Christopher Dorner situation was a bad for me. It just was like, this is crazy, you know. And I ended up, like I said, writing that second manifesto, and you know, the media, you know, it went viral online, and you know, all that stuff. And I just had to back away from it because it was so much, so much distortion of people trying to take my words with good intentions and make them bad intentions. And I just walked away from it.
So let's fast forward to 2020. George Floyd is murdered by the Minneapolis Police Department. What are your thoughts with the riots and the protests? Did it feel like Rodney King all over again? In regards to the reaction, even though it was different. The situation was a little different. Yeah. Let's talk about it. Let's hear your experience.
I would, personally, let's face it, that the Rodney King situation was terrible, and it was terrible when you saw it. You knew that was ridiculous. And you were an officer, and you knew that there was no way in the world that these officers should be beaten on this man like this. And then now, all these years later, I got to sit here and watch a black man who could be any one of my cousins, any one of my friends, could have been me, killed while people sat there and watched, knowing that this guy was doing everything he could do to apply pressure on this black man's neck. He angled himself appropriately to cut off this man's wind and to do what he ultimately did, and that was kill that guy, and to see that, in broad daylight on TV was the most uncomfortable thing I've ever seen, honestly. I mean, it broke my heart to see that man suffer like that. It was in the same vein as Alton Sterling, the gentleman that said he couldn't breathe time and time again. He said, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Me being a larger man, I understand that. Sometimes it's hard as hell to breathe when you're even just laying on your stomach. But to have 3 or 4 people on your back and knowing that, how difficult it is to breathe, and to have these guys on this man's back like that, it broke my heart. I couldn't deal with it. You know what I mean? So it was the same thing with George Floyd. Like, where's the love? Where's the compassion and respect for mankind to where you can just not care if a person lives or dies because of the things that you do, So it just reflects back to so many terrible incidences, year in and year out, of things that happen to us. We never see things like this happen to them, but we always the ones that suffer at the hands of that hate. You know what I mean? And it was terrible, man. It was one of the worst things I've ever seen.
So in the book, you talk about PTSD.
Yeah.
And PTSD coming from your experience as a cop.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah. Well, the first thing about the PTSD situation was, I had never heard of it. I didn't know what PTSD was. I just knew that after situation after situation, I felt like I had become someone else. I felt like I wasn't myself. I felt like I wasn't a happy person. I wasn't a person that truly had love for people the way I normally had love for people. I felt like, what is it that's happening in my life that's so bad that I'm going blind? I have blurred vision. I can barely see out of my eyes. And, that is at the point where I realized that stress is a killer. And trauma after trauma after trauma put me in a situation to where I completely just lost sight of the reality of who I truly was. I wasn't myself, and so many people are so proud, and they have, and the sad thing about being a police officer is you're expected to be so tough, so hard, a person who doesn't have fear of anything or who can handle anything. And anytime you show some sense of sensitivity towards how you feel, people want to assume that you're crazy or assume that you're this, that, and the other. Well, the reality was, no, I'm not crazy. I'm just going through shit that a person shouldn't have to go through. And it's very difficult to navigate through the drama and orchestrate living your normal life and loving your family and your kids and doing things that are normal when you come out for a job where your friends are getting killed, people are dying all around you, where people are conspiring against you, your courts that you think are supposed to protect you are turning against you. Everything that you are taught to believe in is ultimately the thing that is making life worse for you. You know what I mean? So, there's so many people who have been pulled over and had a tragic, a bad scenario or with a cop and been treated disrespectfully by a cop and have pain, and they don't even know it. Things have happened in people's lives and they don't even realize they have PTSD. They don't even realize it. Some people, there's just different levels to it. But there's some people who, you go to war, you come back, and you've seen all this death and killings and murders and all this kind of stuff. It's the same thing, but it's right here in the city. You don't have to be in Vietnam. You didn't have to be in Kuwait to experience death, to experience all the things that, a lot of sick people are feeling in the community every day. So there's so many people who have PTSD and mental illnesses and mental problems because of what they experience growing up in a community where death is just, like you say, something that we just have to live with, circumstances that we just have to live with. So my objective truly is to have everybody look at themselves and get help. Don't be too proud. I don't care. I'm a proud black man, but I can tell you, if I have PTSD, I have it, and I'm not ashamed to say it. But I'm also going to do whatever I can do to help myself and help anybody else I can help that may have it.
So you left the force in 1998. What was, I know you mentioned the straw that broke the camel's back was possibly the officer that arrested you as a cop. But was it just that, or? Yeah. Let's talk about it.
I mean, let's face it. It was a succession of the incidences that were occurring. It was when I realized that I was completely vulnerable. When I realized that officers, people who are supposed to be on your team for political, for racial, for hatred-related issues, where, you experience things where officers will change their stories, conspire, lie, and do things to prove and verify that a black man is nothing to them. And to go through the things that I went through and consider myself to be a person who is supposed to protect the laws of this country was just incredibly too hard a situation for me. It was a contradiction to who I was. They didn't care about me, but I'm supposed to be out defending their position. You know, where was the love and just simply the fair consideration when I was going through what I was going through? You know, so it just got to be where I was so uncomfortable putting that uniform on that I just couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't be phony. I couldn't be fake. I couldn't live that life.
Like finally, like hanging it, like literally hanging it up, like you knew tomorrow you wasn't going.
Well, you know what? It was really funny, and this is. I remember when it ended. I had my son was sick, and I was working in Wilshire Division at the time, and my son lived 2 minutes outside the division in West L.A. And I was working a U car, what they call, which was a report car. I was working alone because I couldn't even work with people at that time. So I was working a U car, and I went to my house, to check on my son. And I was doing my reports. I stopped off to do my reports. It was actually on my lunch. I was doing my reports, and I was finishing stuff I needed to finish. So when I went to the station, it was basically already done, and I didn't have to wait around. Somehow my radio battery died, and the watch. I guess the watch commander and the RTO, which is like the operator, were checking on me. So they were looking for me, and they were summoning me on the radio, but I couldn't hear it because my battery was dead. So ultimately, when I go back to the car, to get in the car, to go back to the station to shut down for the rest of the night, I'm hearing them 7U whatever, code 1. Code 1 means respond immediately. Respond to the radio immediately, right? So I'm 5 minutes away from the station, 8 minutes away at the most. So I respond back, 7U1, here I am, basically letting them know that I'm here. And a sergeant, somebody gets on the line, what's your location? What's your location? I said, en route to the station. Okay, stop where you are right now, whatever. Stop wherever you are. I'm going to come to, like, man, I'm on my way to the station. I said, 7U1, I'm en route to the station. I'm not going to stop in the middle of traffic and just get out the fucking car and wait on the side. So I went to the station. I was 5 minutes away. So I get back to the station, and I walk in, 3 or 4 sergeants, a couple lieutenants, were inside the office, in the watch commander's office. So I walk in the watch commander's office. Oh, where were you and all this kind of shit? Here are these reports. They basically confronted me about some reports that somebody else should have did. You know what I mean? Like, it was reports that were trailing the different days, and they try to act like it was my fault they weren't done when it was somebody else that should have done them. You know what I mean? So I'm like, what are you talking about? I said, these reports, somebody else was supposed to do these. They don't have nothing to do with me. You know what I mean? So it boiled down to them trying to find some bullshit on me. They were conspiring against me. They were all in there, sitting there with having one of those powwow, meetings to try to figure out how they could screw me. You know what I mean? After all this situation with that officer who went around saying that I sided with the gangbangers and all of this BS that was going around, all the negativity. I knew that there was a straight conspiracy against me when I had done nothing to nobody. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I just basically said, hey, you know where I work. You know how to find me. I said, when you figure it out, let me know. And I walked off. And I went upstairs and I took that uniform off. And I said, I ain't never putting this damn uniform on again. And that was the last day they ever saw me as far as working. The last time they saw me, I came back and cleaned my locker out. Because I was done. I wasn't wearing that uniform again. Mm. Never. Because I just didn't trust them no more.
And really, to me, it sounds like that was probably the best decision you made. Because, I mean, based on the stories in this book and even the stories that we talked about today, they might have found an alternative way to get you out of there.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, I know. And that was the fear. And when you realize how crazy it can be and how vulnerable you are, you know, you think to yourself, you know what? I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna make it regardless. You know, most people don't think they can make it after they, you know, get on that job. They think that that's it, the wherewithal and be all. I had to start thinking real quick of ways to, you know, continue to survive, because I knew I wasn't going to be able to do that no more. Because that was it. That was it for me. I couldn't do it anymore.
So, 2022, all the experiences that you've had as a cop, all of the things that you've seen all through all of these years, just living as a black man, as an African American person, what do you think, or what are your recommendations for African Americans in general when dealing with law enforcement? How do we get home safely?
Yeah. You know, the first thing, you know, regardless of what I've experienced, regardless of what I've been through, the myth that I definitely want to dispel is that all officers are bad. All officers are not bad. There are actually some officers with a good heart that just show up to do their job every day and take care of their families and go home. And then there's the ones that have that hatred in their heart, that make life miserable for people because they feel like they have the power and the authority to do so. Those are the ones that make it hell for any and everybody. When you have a gun and you have the ability to take someone's life at a moment's notice and then be able to justify it with a pen and paper, it is just absolutely the scariest thing in the world to be a black man in a society that has these types of people walking around utilizing their power and authority over innocent people. I would say, as long as we know that they have that authority, as black men and women and people, we have to be humble. We have to humble ourselves and put ourselves in a position to try and release as much of that hatred as we can out of our hearts, so that when we're confronted with a hostile officer or someone who has the ability to change your life at a moment's notice, and some will do it no matter how kind and loving and respectful you are. But we know they'll do it if you come at them with a bad attitude, if you come at them hostile and angry. So the key to it is to survive, to get past the situation, to live to see the next moment, and to be able to, at the very least, if something happens that's wrong, to be able to report it at another time. But don't contribute to their easy ability to harm you if they want to anyway. Don't contribute to it. Get past it, live to see another day. And I would say that, being a law enforcement officer is very challenging. A lot of people think that it's just fun and gunslinging and all that, but it's more to it. It's stuff to it that they don't talk about. There's stuff to it that they could never prepare you for, because there's no formula for all the hate and all the craziness that can take place in your life as a police officer.
And what would you say to the young, aspiring police recruit, black police recruit?
Yeah. Whew. I don't know. In fairness, I want to be fair. I want to be fair because I know black officers who have had a career and they got through it and they've retired and they have a good life now, So I don't want to utilize my individual circumstance as the wherewithal and be all, because there are people who have had good careers in law enforcement. But I think a lot of that has to do with their backgrounds and the understanding of being in a paramilitary situation, knowing how to deal with the bureaucracy and the politics. And then some of it is luck, and then some of it is just people had no other choice. They didn't feel like they had another alternative, so they stuck it in and they dealt with it and they took it. And they, all the hate and the drama. I mean, there's stories all day, every day with black police officers of terrible things that have happened. But they had to get through it. They had no other choice. And some of them didn't feel like they could do anything else. I got out because I couldn't do it anymore. And I felt like, I'm going to survive regardless, because I'm a survivor. I'm a fighter. I'm going to do what I got to do. I got kids. I'm taking care of my family. You know what I mean? Some people don't have that in them. Some people don't have the ability to adapt and to adjust. And they sit there and they either go crazy, they lose it, kill themselves, or kill somebody in their family, and next thing you know, their lives are turned upside down, So, as far as a young person aspiring to come on this job, I would say you think about it very seriously. I think that we do need some quality black men on the job to keep them honest, to keep them doing things the right way, but also say, the job needs to change. The job needs to adapt and adjust and get their officers to realize their responsibility to understand the people that they police. They need to get out in the black community and learn what people are about. You can't keep bringing these people with all this hatred in their hearts to police the people. It's only going to make things worse, because they're going to hate their jobs and they're going to treat the people like they hate them. And then now it's going to just continue year after year after year, the same old stuff. So if you're a young officer aspiring to be on a job, I'd say, like I said, think hard and be careful.
So what's next? What's next for ex-officer Joe Jones?
Of course, I've stepped out on faith in regards to writing this book and telling my story. And I told my story with the hopes of trying to affect some change. My theory and my platform, basically at this point, is truth for change. Truth, the number 4, and change. But it really is truth for change. Okay? The reality of that is I'm telling my story so that we can hopefully create some reform on the police department, as well as we teach our people how to survive dealing with officers. because let's face it, it's a lot of people being killed at the hands of officers. And I also, with that same breath, or even a more harsh breath, say to my people and my young men that are killing each other, that we got to stop that. How do we ask others to have compassion for our lives if we don't have compassion for our own lives? I mean, so, my thing is to push my agenda, I'm not probably going to be leading marches and things of that nature, but, I've told my story with the hopes that people will read my book and they will see what things happen to officers. And with that information, from politicians to police officers to judges to anyone that matters, look at the reality of what can happen. Look at the reality of what can happen on a daily basis to a person who simply came on a job with love in his heart and wanting to see what he could do to make his community a better place. And, that's that. Lives can be ruined. And, I'm here to tell about it. And I'm just trying to make sure that I express, the sentiments I have in regards to what needs to be done to get some changes made on these departments, and as well as in the black community, those brothers and sisters killing each other. This stuff's got to stop. It's got to stop.